Welcome back to the Spirit, Mind and Soul podcast. Today I'm covering a subject that we haven't really covered on here before. I'm speaking with Kirsten, who is a life coach who particularly works with people on eating disorders, having experienced that herself, anorexia and bulimia. She'll be talking a lot about her own journey with that. I myself, as someone who struggled with bulimia for probably spanning, I'd say, 3 decades. It was about 20 years from the age of 14. I do share a little bit about that here, and Kirsten speaks to me about that. And, hopefully by both of us speaking about it, we can help you in some way if you're struggling, or even just to see the signs in others who might be struggling. If you haven't hit that subscribe button already, I'd really appreciate if you could do so. It's helping this channel grow. It just takes a second. Thank you so much. And for now, here's Kirsten. Hi Kirsten, thanks so much for coming on the Spirit, Mind and Soul podcast today. This is a really special episode today because what we're about to talk about isn't anything we've covered before on this podcast, and me having gone through a similar journey to you, I can really relate, and I think there's a lot of women out there that will be able to relate on some level as well. So I think we're about to have a really interesting and deep dive into a subject which obviously is bulimia, anorexia, mental health. So can you just take us back to what life was like before you led into this personal journey for you? What life was like before, and what was the events that was leading up to the eating disorder that you had and that you recovered from?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for having me here. It's such an honor. Yeah. As you know, name's Kirsten Hunneyball. I'm currently working as a life coach. And I guess my journey started when I was very young. With a lot of self-doubt, a lot of criticism. I do believe that I had undiagnosed ADHD as a child. I mean, I have now adult diagnosed ADHD. So I think that there were a lot of things that I really struggled with that quote unquote normal people didn't struggle with, that I found really hard to regulate my nervous system. I was very jumpy. I was very happy. I always needed to move. I think I was a very joyous child in general. And I mean, there were so many things that influenced my relationship to my body, but mainly I was bullied quite a lot at school, mostly for my appearance. I have freckles, so that was like a really big point. I was a very flamboyant person. I was very outgoing, outspoken. I had a lot of energy, and people kind of didn't like that. So at school, I was told to keep quiet. I was told to sit still. And so I was always told that like my energy and who I was just too much for people. I had a very reserved and quiet father. And my mother was struggling with depression at the time, and my sister struggled with her own mental health issues. She's older than me. And so I kind of adopted this ability to be a fly on the wall in my own experience. And at the same time, I was a very high achiever, perfectionistic. I was getting straight A's at school. I was sporty. I did triathlons. I was in the school band, so I was doing extramurals. And so on the surface seemed like I had it all together. And at the meantime, having a lot of self-critical thoughts that were existing internally. And I remember I used to write lists of all the reasons why Kirsten shouldn't be worthy of love and how skinny she wanted to be so that she could be loved by others. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff, just low self-worth, low self-esteem. A lot of guys really treating me poorly in school. And then as well, I had an incident with an adult male when I was young that was also sexual assault. And so I think there was just a whole bunch of things that kind of went together. And so when I was in grade 10, I don't know what that is where you guys are, but grade 10, so around about 15 years old, our school project was on mental health. And we were given mental health of bulimia and anorexia to now go research. And unfortunately, I found at the time a lot of pro-anorexia and pro-bulimia websites that I then dived into, and I became quite obsessed about. And that at the same time, my mom was dieting. And so there was a whole bunch of things. And so I started restricting my food severely, and that kind of got me through life in school. I managed my academics, my heavy schedule, my emotional dysregulation, my physical dysregulation through sport and restrictive eating. Then over some time, it went into bulimia. And when I was in varsity, it just flourished. I didn't have a support system. No one kind of knew about eating disorders at the time. It wasn't really a thing that was spoken about a lot. And so I suffered in silence. I got heavily into recreational use of drugs and alcohol. And I just became, I think, a lost person in general. And together with drugs, alcohol, bulimia, high achieving, feeling lost in my life, another trauma I experienced in varsity, I kind of just lost myself completely. And it was a very, very dark place. I would spend hours and hours. I think the longest time I remember spending binging and purging actively was 16 hours nonstop. And that just became my life. And I was completely enthralled by it. I was anorexic at the time, and my behavior was compulsive. I saw no way out. And it just, it was really, really something. And when I was in my third year of varsity, I decided to admit myself into a treatment center, which I did. And after 3 weeks, I was like, no, this isn't for me. I don't want it, because I gained weight. I had to eat certain foods. I felt trapped. And so I went away from that and didn't get my recovery. My parents then got divorced at the age of 24, I think it was. And then I was out in the world, where I had to go now find a job without a degree and pave a way for myself. And it was quite something. And then I actually found the 12-step group. So I had a group called Anorexics and Bulimics Anonymous that was across the road from the house that I was living in Durban in South Africa. And I had never heard of anything like that before. So I just went. And I met some really cool people there. And I started going to the Narcotics Anonymous as well, and really just found a lot of support with people in that structure. And so for the next 3 years, I just dove into the 12-step recovery program, and just dedicated my life to trying to do better. And for 3 years, every single day, I woke up promising myself that I wouldn't restrict, binge, or purge. And it took me 3 years before I could get 1 day without doing it. So it was really, really hectic. And then I just felt like really passionate about my relationship. My spiritual relationship really started to flourish there. I became a lot more connected to my inner self. And then I had this desire to help other people. And so now I work as a recovery coach, helping others with their journeys, and it is really hard, really, really hard. And now, my relationship with my body, it's not always perfect. It's I have bad body image days. I have thoughts of restriction, binging, purging. I do have that, and I think a lot of the time professionals in the industry feel a lot of fear sharing that. But for me, it's like, I'd rather share with people that I'm just as human as the person I'm helping. And that establishing these tools and these modalities and all of these kind of beautiful things in my life that can support me making the right decision at every point, has become a really big part of my journey. So I have a healthy relationship to food and exercise in my body today. I have a healthy romantic relationship of 7 years. I have a stable job. I have my own home, all sorts that I never would have imagined. So that's kind of like very, very short summary version of then and now.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I definitely want to go back and just touch on some things that you've mentioned. And your journey is almost similar to mine, because, hopefully we can be the example that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and, you can come through the other side, and life can be amazing, a life that you couldn't have dreamed of back then. But back then, I mean, and you've mentioned that you found even just admitting yourself into somewhere, I think that's so brave. I wasn't even aware that there was any help out there. And also I think there was too much shame for me to even speak out or admit to myself. I was definitely in denial. Was there ever any denial for you, or were you very aware that there was something seriously wrong with your eating and your thoughts and beliefs towards your eating and your body?
Yeah, I think it waxes and wanes, and then there were times where I was very aware that there was a problem, but maybe wasn't ready to deal with it, and there were other times where I wasn't as aware, and it's kind of like progressed like that in my life, you know. So there were times where I knew, okay, binging and purging, that's like a huge thing, that's very obvious, there's something wrong there. But then restriction on the other side kind of was a little bit easier to hide. Compulsive exercise was a little bit easier to hide. And so, recovery for me becomes about really being able to have those authentic and honest conversations with myself, where I can say, is this problematic or not? Am I depending on this? Am I attached to this thing that I'm doing? Would I be willing to let it go? And so I think over time it became different levels of being able to have that deep conversation with myself. And even in like my life in recovery, there's been times where I've had to step back and go like, oh, wait, this behavior is picking itself up again. And I need to look at that seriously. And just because I'm in a position where I'm helping other people doesn't mean that I don't still have those conversations with myself, you know. Yes. But I suppose the shame piece, definitely, in seeking help, that's happened in two times for me. The first one was when I first decided that I wanted to get help. I decided I was going to go to treatment, and it was a year later until I actually went, because I was like, you know, I can just change this. I can just stop this. And so the denial was that I could do it on my own. That was the biggest lie I was telling myself. And then the second time was when I relapsed in my professional career, and I became very, very fearful of exposing that. And I actually had to work through a lot of shame, and then come into my therapeutic relationship with my therapist to actually share like, whoa, I've hit a stumbling block and I need to reevaluate and kind of get back on track. So those were the two pivotal times for me where I really needed to face shame and go like, there's no point. No one wins if I'm hiding this. Like, I don't win, other people don't win. It just, yeah. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
For me, the denial was because you've experienced both. You had anorexia, which is often visible. People can see that. With bulimia, people often, it's not something you can see because we hide it very well. So for me, I was bulimic. And I was in denial because I thought, there's a little voice telling me you have an eating disorder and this has been going on for a really long time. And then there was another part that thought, who are you to say that you have an eating disorder when it's not visible? People can't tell. It's something I'm doing in private. People wouldn't look at me and think she has an eating disorder, because I don't even like to say that I never got that thin, because I think then it's saying that people who have eating disorders are thin, and that's not, now I know that is not the case, but back then that was my belief. So I was very much in denial that I even had an eating disorder, even though it was, it ended up being spanning decades. So what if, anyone who is sort of in that place of denial, I guess that's why I didn't reach out for help at the time, because I thought they'll just laugh and they'll say you do not have an eating disorder. That was my beliefs back then. And I was very much in that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that experience is something that so many people have. And that's why a lot of people I'm not bad enough, or people can't see it. And basically what it is I'm not validating my own experience. I'm not saying that, yes, this is what I'm facing. And yes, this is what is hard. And, with my clients, I often say, when we've got that inner critic coming and saying, you're not worthy, it's not bad enough, or whatever, come in with a compassionate voice that says, firstly, validate that experience. Yes, this is hard. Of course I want to hide this. There's a lot of stigma around this. There's a lot of people who don't understand this illness. My family might not understand it. Then I have to admit that I've been doing these things that harm myself, and I don't even understand why I'm doing those things. So validate that, of course you want to hide. Of course you want to keep it secret. But then also get curious and go, I know that this is something that I feel shameful around. I know that this is something that I don't feel is valid. But I wonder what it might feel like to talk to someone about this. I wonder if that might help me feel a little bit better, And when you open that door of curiosity to just say, maybe we don't deal with it all at once. Maybe we don't admit all these different things, and maybe we don't deal with all the traumas and everything, but maybe just have a conversation and see what that might feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that because that's something that I do in every part of my life. I always think, get curious, and I always say that to people, just get curious about what, the thoughts and your beliefs around that. So yeah, I think that's really helpful, firstly, and also speaking, because the first time I ever told someone, the reaction was lovely. It wasn't, I think people, I think we have expectations that people are going to react negatively or in a way that's not going to help us move forward. But actually, I think anyone listening who is suffering with that or with anything, just talking, you normally get an empathetic reaction or a reaction that's going to surprise you in a positive way. So yeah, I wish I had spoken out earlier. So yeah, I would definitely advise anyone to speak out as soon as possible, because it helps on the journey. Even just knowing that someone else knows, it's like a weight off your shoulders, I think.
I think also because, we view the world the way we view ourselves. So, for instance, if I have lived my entire life criticizing myself, telling myself how worthless I am, telling myself how bad and imperfect I am, and potentially also got that voice from other people as well, maybe a parent who struggles with addiction or narcissism or something like that, or maybe I've had an abusive partner. If I'm constantly surrounded and internally and externally by the voices that judge me when I'm not doing okay, then of course that's what I'm going to expect. I'm going to expect that when I reach out to people. And so I always think about, who are you reaching out to? If you're going to the person who's abusing you and saying, I'm struggling with an eating disorder, chances are that person might not be helpful for you. They might, you never know. But finding someone that feels safe to talk to about it, and that's a privilege as well, because not everyone has someone safe to talk to about it. But if you can find someone that might have a different voice, that's not critical, you can actually start to see that most people walking around from day to day are not horrible. They're not judgmental. They're not going to bash you down when you're not doing okay. And that was something I really had to wrap my head around, is that people that care about me are going to want to help me when I say I'm not okay.
And did anyone know about you, Kirsten, back then? Were people around you, your parents or your family or friends, were they aware that there was something going on?
So my mom knew, but I don't think she fully understood it. And I don't know if she understood the extent of it. So this was maybe 15, 20 years ago when I was in the thick of it. No, that's a lie. 15 years ago when I was in the thick of it. And so I don't think a lot of people really understood eating disorders as much as they do today. And so she knew that I wasn't eating, but she didn't know what that meant. And I see that a lot in parents today. Then you'll have, my child's just not eating because they're stressed at school, or my child's just doing 4 hours of sport because they're a dedicated person, So to answer your question, yes and no. They knew, but they didn't understand. So it was hard for them to kind of know what to do about it.
Yeah. So you never had, it was still very much a secret then. So there wasn't the type of conversations or people trying to help because they didn't know. Yeah.
So my mom thought I was depressed. So she took me to a therapist for depression, but we didn't talk about the eating disorder. We spoke about other stuff. And that's also a lot of the time what I see in or what I experienced in therapy as well, is a lot of the time we didn't talk about the eating disorder. And I know that you need to talk about other stuff in your life as well when you go to therapy. But I remember the first time a therapist actually just asked me, like, can we talk about the eating disorder? And I was like, whoa, this is really cool. So no, there wasn't conversations. No one was checking in, asking me, have you been able to eat this meal? How did you do with that meal today? Were you able to keep it in? It was kind of just like swept under the rug a little bit.
And I think another misconception as well, and something that I only had this realization in the past few years after, once I was sort of out of that and I was in a healthier place. I always thought it was about my weight. I thought I was trying to get thinner. I now realise, and it was by looking back at patterns, it was actually a way to control, to take back control. When I realised, and it's only because I had gotten to a place in my life probably about 8 years ago, and I had my children. I'd had a few years of, I thought I was fine. I thought I'd overcome it and I would never go back to that place. And my life completely changed. Not for the worse, but my life was so different from the start of the year to the end of the year. I was the fittest, healthiest, slimmest version of myself. I was very healthy. I was in a really good place mentally, but my life was so different that I fell back into bulimia and I didn't know why. And once I came out of it, and this is when I finally spoke out to a friend, and it was so helpful for me, I realised, wow, it's to take back control. My life feels like it's sort of, I'm spiralling out of control, and it's my way of taking back control. And I was 14 when I started, when my eating disorder started, and my life was very much spiralling out of control. So looking back now, it was never really about the weight. It was about me taking control. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what in my experience, I first started losing weight in my restriction. And then what I found was the feeling of controlling my food and my weight helped me feel like I had control. So it was kind of like the two go hand in hand, where it became about weight and control, and I couldn't really always discern. Maybe this is why parts work is so helpful for eating disorders, is because there's a part of me that did it for the weight, the way my body feels. And then we can go into the way that the brain is formed in a person with an eating disorder, and our self-perception and our gray matter. And there's so much neuroscience behind it anyway. And then there's the control part. And studies I've done with an absolutely wonderful lady called Jan Winhall in Canada. She's in Canada. We talk about using these behaviors as a way to shift a nervous system state. So the words you used were, I felt out of control and I needed to feel more in control. So what you're actually doing is you're trying to control the feeling. And the feeling is feeling overwhelming. It's feeling dysregulated. It's feeling like you can't cope with it. And so what we're actually doing is we're trying to control our feelings. And we do this through physically jolting our bodies. We do this through regulating ourselves through food or through the lack of food or exercise or something like that. So absolutely, it's the desire to be in control of the state that we're in that feels out of control, whether that's a fear or an anxiety or a depression or people's perceptions of us, So, but I think if I were to look at how the eating disorder started to present itself post the weight loss. So in the beginning, it was, I want to lose weight. That was my goal. I want to be the skinniest person. Now, if the eating disorder voice creeps up, it's I can't cope with this feeling. I need to feel released from this experience. I need to feel more in control of that situation or that outcome. So absolutely, I think it started with the weight and it progressed into, so it's a mixed bag. It's a catch-22 chicken and egg thing, which came first. Not really sure.
Yeah. Thank you. That does give really great insight, actually. it makes complete sense now, and it's I've never heard anyone else explain it from that point of view. So yeah, thank you. I think that would be really helpful.
I wonder if I can get a quote that I literally just posted on my Instagram this morning. Can I read something to you?
Yeah.
So I love this. So this is from Judith Herman's Trauma and Recovery book. It says, abused children generally discover at some point that they can produce a major, though temporary, alteration in their affective state, so their nervous system state, by voluntarily inducing autonomic crisis or extreme autonomic arousal, and that the feelings can most effectively be terminated by a major jolt to the body. The most dramatic method of achieving this is through deliberate self-injury. Herman then goes on to say that while self-injury is the most spectacular soothing mechanism, children may find other ways to induce major alterations: purging and vomiting, compulsive sexual behavior, compulsive risk-taking or exposure to danger, and the use of psychoactive drugs become the vehicles which abused children attempt to regulate their internal emotional state. I know that was long, but the reason why I love it is because
Powerful.
Absolutely. And it just goes to show that if we're observing this in children that aren't necessarily exposed to a job or a relationship yet, we're seeing right there at the beginning of existence and life, we're seeing that children respond to abuse or trauma through self-injury. We can understand that this would be carried on into our adulthood. We can understand that this is the natural way for a human to respond to trauma. It just blows my mind.
Yeah. At what point did you then realise that you need to help people, you need to share your story and your journey and help other people in the way that you're doing now? Because you're a life and recovery coach now, and you're working with, is it women and men you work with? Or primarily women? Yeah. So what was the point where you thought, this is my calling, I need to share my journey and help others?
Yeah. So I think the seed is first planted when I was in the 12-step groups, and in the step 12 is to give back what you have received. And there was a part of that kind of drove the first inclination to help people. But I recognized that I didn't have to do it. I didn't have to give back to other people in order to keep my recovery. I tended to disagree with that as being a requirement to be recovered. However, when I started helping other people, I started to see how naturally it came to me, And at the time, like I said, I didn't have a degree. I was working as a waitress and a fitness instructor. I didn't know what I was doing with my life. And there was a special that came on to some academy I was joining to be a life coach. And so I was like, oh, that sounds like something I could do, because friends would always come to me, ask me for advice, etc., etc. And so I kind of just gravitated naturally toward coaching. And then I started to question, is this right for me? And there's a lot of times where I've sat and gone, I really don't want to do this work. And not because I don't enjoy it, but because it's emotionally taxing at times. And also, every single time I deal with a client, I am asked to revisit my own experience, which sometimes can be a bit tricky. And so there's been many times I've been like, I don't know if I want to do this work anymore. Maybe there's a different path for my life. And quite honestly, like I said, I have a very deep spiritual relationship. And there was one moment where I was praying, and I just said, God, what do you want me to do with my life? And I just heard this voice or this feeling or something just said, recover from your eating disorder and help other people do the same. That's it. It's all you need to do. Whether that's the job you do, whether that's advocacy, whether that's blog writing, just do that. And whatever else comes into your life will be, just side that. It will be extra stuff. And so I kind of just, I went with it and feel like it's really natural for me. and haven't yet seen any other direction that I would want to go in. I did get an audio engineering degree at one point, and I found that was very helpful because it allowed me to start my podcast called Curious About Recovery, which is really, yeah, exactly. And so that kind of for me is also like, if one day I'm not a coach for whatever reason, then I still think having that space where I can help other people speak about their eating disorders or about, research into how to help people. I speak to professionals all around the world in different modalities and all of that. So that's a very long answer to a short question.
No, that's okay. I was going to mention your podcast, Curious About Recovery, and you have professionals in different fields to come on and I guess give their views and perspectives, and it just help, just anything that can help people who are in recovery or leading into recovery, maybe aren't through the other side yet, but or just because it can be quite daunting to take that first step, I think, because it's life-changing. Your life then changes, your habits have to change, your beliefs and your thoughts. So it's quite, often, even though it's not serving as well, it's the known, it's, our comfort, safety, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the podcast has a couple of different things that it takes on. So the one is where I do interviews of professionals. And as the name of the podcast says, it's Curious About Recovery. So I think that there's a lot of people out there saying, this is how you recover from an eating disorder. And I really want to emphasize the importance of every person's unique journey. And so I have some people on there talking about plant medicine and, alternative healing methods. And then I have some people talking about very mainstream kind of CBT and dietetics and, so there's nothing that I'm going oh, this is the one message that is right for everyone. So absolutely. So I get curious about people's perspectives. And then I also sometimes share my own insights to things that I've learned along the way. A big part of my life has been music. So music has been a big part of my recovery. And so I have an episode about the influence of music and how that can help you from a neurological level, how it can help you from a spiritual level. So personal stories and professional insights on eating disorder recovery at any stage. So early stages, pre, during, post, some people who've had years of experience, some people who are just starting off. So it's just really a big spectrum.
Yeah. And I will leave details, obviously, for people to come and get in touch with you or just come and follow your work and what you share, your podcast. So, yeah, and I do encourage people to come and check out your work and, get in touch if they feel called to as well. And what about for you, Kirsten? So is there, obviously you're doing this work now to help other people, you're sharing your journey. Is there anything in the future that you're looking for that's just for you?
So I'm actually glad that you asked, because there's a lot of things that I have that are just for me. I said that music is a big part of my life. And so I actually am a music producer, and I have been working this year to produce an album to release, and I'm busy in the process of releasing that album. And that music for me is a process of really expressing my journey through self-discovery, through my connection with, what is life, my philosophies. And it kind of mixes a bit of electronic dance music, so EDM, and a little bit of Afrotech together with some indie. So it's if anyone wants to know, if you could imagine Black Coffee and Maggie Rogers and Ben Boma having a baby, and that would be what my music would be. So if anyone knows music, they'll know what that means. So that's one thing that I'm really looking forward to. And then the other thing is that I am really, really trying to move into the space of group work, retreats. I'm hosting a retreat this week in a nearby city. And I am starting a meditation page because I have been told by many people that my voice is very soothing. So I'm in the process of setting up my meditation page that is called Auden Shruti. And that will be a completely different brand that will be purely dedicated to meditations. So yeah, that's what's in the, and I'm traveling next year as well.
Yeah, so just traveling just for fun, just to explore the world. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. That's so good. Yeah, so many exciting things coming up that maybe there might have been a past version of you that just could never have dreamed of the life you're living now. It just shows what's possible.
Yeah. Well, if you think about that, the music is something I stopped completely when I was in my eating disorder. There was no connection to my creative self in my eating disorder because my eating disorder just took on everything. And then in my recovery, like that's just been a part of my life that's flourished. And then travel. I never would have been able to travel. I wouldn't have had the finances because I would have spent all my money on binge food or whatever. I wouldn't have been able to keep a job. Wouldn't have been able to show up for people. And if I was traveling, I would definitely not have enjoyed it because everything would be about where I could exercise and what food I was going to avoid and all of that. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. That was I think that was therapeutic for me as well to have that conversation. Yeah, and I'm sure there's so many people that can take so much from what you've shared. So thank you so much. A really important conversation, Kirsten, and I thank you so much for coming on and sharing it with us.
Thank you. I've really appreciated being here.
Thank you so much for listening to Kirsten's story. I really hope that you enjoyed that, hearing about not only her journey with an eating disorder, but her recovery. And I hope it gives you hope, no matter what you're struggling with in life, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. We can literally come through anything. Thank you so much just for listening to these podcast episodes, for hearing these beautiful, amazing people's journey. This also is giving me the confidence and inspiration to share my own journey, not just the eating disorder journey that I experienced, but just all aspects of my life. The more I hear others share authentically and vulnerably, it just inspires me more to do the same. All details on how to contact Kirsten, you can absolutely just reach out to her if you're struggling or if you want to work with her. All details on how to do so are in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could hit the like button, let me know you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.